It is a hot Saturday afternoon. You pull your old gas truck up a long grade, lean into the throttle the way you always have, and there it is again. That dry little rattle under load, the lazy pull, the feeling that this engine used to breathe better than this. You know the sound. You have been hearing it more and more, and it is not getting quieter on its own. By the time you coast into the gas station at the bottom, the receipt says $47 and the truck still pings. On the way home, you stop at the parts store, because that is what a man does when something is not right, and there on the shelf is the usual answer, a can of upper engine cleaner, $15.99. You have bought one before. Maybe you have bought 3 or 4 of them over the last couple of years, $16 at a time, and the rattle is still there the next month. That is $70, $80 in cans, and the truck still pings going up the same hill. Now, there is a method the old shop mechanics used, the men who kept engines running for decades before there was a shelf full of cans to choose from, and the whole treatment costs about $1.37. 1 gallon of distilled water. That is it. The only reason you were never taught it is that nobody makes a dime teaching a man to use a jug of water and his own judgment. There is a great deal of money in selling him another can every couple of months. So the old method sat quiet in shops and in the hands of careful men, and most truck owners kept paying. By the end of this, you will know exactly what that old method is, why it works on the right engine, when it does not, and whether your truck is a candidate. I will put a dollar amount on everything, and I will not overstate a single claim. I want to be straight with you before I go any further. If you have been reaching for another $16 can of upper engine cleaner every time your old truck feels a little tired under load, I am not here to sell you a different can. And if somebody told you that 1 jug of water poured into an engine will give you 500,000 trouble-free miles, I am not here to sell you that story either, because it is not true. Here is what is true. Carbon deposits build up inside your combustion chambers over the years. They are real. They affect how that engine runs. And the old shopmen had a cheap, careful way to deal with light deposits long before every answer came in a spray can. A gallon of distilled water runs about $1.37. A can of commercial upper engine cleaner runs about $15.99. The difference between those two numbers is not a miracle. It is a lost skill with an honest scope. By the end of this, you will understand what water decarbonizing actually is, why it sometimes works when it does not work, and whether your truck is a candidate or a good way to ruin an engine. I will put a dollar amount on everything, and I will be honest about the limits because that is what the old mechanics would have done. My father never called this a miracle, and neither did the men I learned from. They called it decarbonizing, and they treated it the way a careful mechanic treats any old method, with judgment. If the engine was sound and just getting a little crusty in the chambers, they had a cheap way to try before a man started buying things. If the engine was worn out, they told you that too. That is how I was raised in a shop in Missouri. Try the honest, cheap thing first. Write the number down and never confuse a useful old method with a cure-all. I share these because somebody has to hand them on or they are gone for good. Before I show you what to do, you need to understand why it works. Because the why tells you what to expect and what not to expect. Your engine burns fuel and air thousands of times a minute, and over years of that, residues from fuel and oil bake onto the inside surfaces of the combustion chamber, the piston tops, the cylinder head, the valves. Those deposits are real. The engineering literature calls them combustion chamber deposits, and they have been studied for decades because they matter. They raise compression, promote hot spots that cause ping and knock under load, increase emissions, and make the engine feel sluggish and rough. That is the plain reason your old truck pings going up a hill and feels like it lost a step. It may not be the only reason. Worn parts, bad timing, fouled plugs, and poor fuel can do the same, but deposits are one real common cause on an older gasoline engine that has put on a lot of miles. Now here is the part that matters. The Society of Automotive Engineers published a paper on combustion chamber deposit flaking, and what it found is straightforward. Some deposits flake and break loose when exposed to water. Water was more effective at causing that flaking than gasoline or other organic solvents in their testing. That is the real mechanism behind the old trick. It is not magic chemistry in a milk jug. It is thermal and moisture shock. You introduce a fine amount of water into a hot intake stream, the engine turns it to steam, that steam contacts deposits that have been baked on for years, and the repeated exposure to moisture and temperature change can cause those deposits to crack and flake away. The pieces blow out the exhaust. But that same paper also says the response varies. It depends on the chemistry of the deposit, the detergent history of the fuel, and the age and thermal history of the buildup. Some deposits flake readily, others hardly respond at all. That is the honest heart of this whole thing, and I will not dress it up for you. Water may help some deposits break loose, but it is not a universal reset button. A second piece of modern research matters too. Water injection reduces in-cylinder temperature and reduces knock tendency. That helps explain why the old mechanics associated a water treatment with smoother running and less pinging afterward. But that research describes controlled injection systems, not licensed to pour liquid into an intake. Write this down. The honest expectation on the right older gasoline engine is that this treatment may reduce light deposit-related ping, help roughness caused by chamber buildup, and sometimes sharpen throttle response. The honest expectation for what it will not do is just as important. It will not fix worn piston rings, a burned valve, dead ignition parts, a bad fuel injector, low compression from mechanical wear, or the kind of intake valve coking on modern direct injection. Engines that often calls for manufacturer-approved cleaners or walnut blasting. If you remember nothing else, remember that. If this kind of careful, plain teaching is what you want more of, the old ways that save real money and tell you the truth about limits, subscribe. I put one of these out regularly, and every one of them puts a dollar amount on the fix and an honest scope on the claim. Now let me show you the method. This is where I need your full attention, because the method has to be done right or not at all. And before I walk you through a single step, I need to tell you who this is for and who it is not for. This is for an older gasoline spark ignition truck, the kind with a carburetor or a simple throttle body setup where you can access the intake airstream without pulling apart a bunch of modern hardware. It is for an engine that is mechanically sound but showing symptoms that fit light to moderate chamber deposits. A little pinging under load, some idle roughness that crept in over time, a gradual feeling that the engine lost a step. If that description fits your truck, keep listening. If your engine has active overheating, heavy mechanical knocking, serious oil burning, an obvious misfire with codes, or if it is a modern direct injection engine where the manufacturer already points technicians to approved chemical procedures or walnut blasting, this is not for you. General Motors says plainly that fuel injector cleaning is not endorsed as general preventive maintenance except as directed by a published diagnostic procedure. Subaru's service information for certain current engines calls for walnut blasting on specific deposit complaints. Those are professional procedures for a reason. The old trick I am about to show you lives in a different world, the world of simple, older gasoline engines where a careful man, with good judgment, could do a few things himself. Respect the boundary. Here is what you need. A gallon of distilled water, about $1.37 at Walmart. Not tap water, distilled. A reusable plastic spray bottle if you want the misting approach, about $1.34. Or if you want the metered vacuum feed approach, a length of clear vinyl tubing, about $4.96 for 20 feet at the hardware store, though you only need a couple of feet and the rest stays in the shop for years. That tubing is reusable shop hardware, not part of your per-treatment cost. For comparison, a single can of commercial upper engine cleaner runs about $15.99. So your consumable cost is $1 and change. Write that down. The phrase I want you to hold in your mind is metered mist or controlled vacuum-fed sip. Never pour water into your engine. The old German shop method describes introducing water into the air supply through a vacuum line near the throttle or carburetor area. The historical practice specifies an engine speed of roughly 2,500 to 3,000 revolutions per minute. No load. Engine fully warmed. That gives you the skeleton. Here is the step-by-step. Step 1. Warm the engine fully. I mean true operating temperature, the thermostat open, the radiator warm, the engine at a steady normal idle. Not kind of warm, not a couple of minutes. The whole point is steam-forming conditions inside the combustion chamber. A cold engine and this method do not belong in the same sentence. Step 2. Bring the engine up to a steady, fast idle, roughly 2,500 to 3,000 revolutions per minute, with no load. If you need a helper to hold the throttle or set the fast idle, use one. The truck should be in park or neutral, parking brake set, outdoors in a well-ventilated area. This is a controlled demonstration condition. You are not driving it. You are not loading it. Step 3. Introduce only a fine mist or a very slow vacuum-fed trickle of distilled water into the intake airstream. If you are using the spray bottle, you are misting into the air cleaner opening or the carburetor throat in short, light passes. If you are using the vacuum line method, you are letting the engine's own intake vacuum draw a tiny sip of water through the tubing. And I mean tiny. The goal is not to fill a cylinder with water. The goal is to let small amounts of water enter the intake stream so the hot engine turns it to steam, and that steam contacts the chamber deposits, causing the thermal and moisture shock that promotes flaking. Think of it as a steam cleaner working from the inside. That is exactly what the old shop men were after. Step 4. Watch the engine, not your nerve. If the engine stumbles hard or drops RPM sharply, your feed rate is too high. Back off immediately. Reduce the water to a lighter mist or a slower sip. The engine's response is your gauge. You are not trying to force it through a cough. You are trying to maintain a smooth, slightly steamy idle at that elevated RPM. If you see a little white vapor from the exhaust, that is water vapor. That is expected. If the engine bogs, lurches, or sounds wrong, stop the water feed right then. Step 5. Keep the treatment short, then reassess. I am not going to give you a brave ounce count because the right amount depends on your engine, your intake setup, and how the motor responds. A conservative first pass is a few minutes of light misting or slow sipping, then let the engine stabilize at normal idle. After it settles, drive the truck gently and pay attention. Did the ping under load improve? Is the idle smoother? Does the throttle feel a little crisper? If yes, the treatment did something useful, and you can repeat it once more at a later date if symptoms return. If nothing changed, do not keep repeating it, hoping for a different answer. Step 6. If the symptom stays, stop romanticizing the trick and diagnose. Check plugs, check timing, check fuel quality. Run a compression test or a leak down test. Take it to a man who does this work if the numbers do not add up. A folk remedy that did not work the first time is not going to work the 5th time, and repeating it is how a man turns a deposit problem into an engine problem. Now let me say something plain about the wrong way, because there is plenty of bad advice floating around. Do not dump a bottle of water down the throat of an engine because somebody online told you the smoke means it is working. The old trick was a controlled trick. The historical documents describe water introduction into the intake stream, a mist, a sip, a measured feed. They do not describe reckless slugs of liquid, and there is a reason the engineering literature includes a whole paper on hydrolocking. Hydrolock happens when enough liquid water enters a cylinder that the piston cannot compress it. Water does not compress the way air does, and the result can be a bent connecting rod, a cracked head, or a destroyed engine. That is not a scare story. That is physics. A controlled mist is one thing. A slug of liquid is another, and the distance between them is the distance between a useful old method and a wrecked motor. The old shopmen did not invent water injection or steam decarbonizing. Patents describing water and steam decarbonizing attachments for internal combustion engines go back to at least 1923. A patent from 1977 still describes water introduction through the intake mixture and says it tends to reduce carbon depositing on plugs and in the cylinders. What the Depression-era mechanics and the men who came after them did was live in a world before retail shelves were full of dedicated decarbonizing products. They had heat, they had water, and they had judgment. My father's crowd did not keep old engines alive by shopping harder. They kept them alive by diagnosing first, trying the cheap, honest thing when it fit, and refusing to buy a bottle every time a motor felt a little lazy. You are not learning a new method. You are recovering an old one. Now, if the treatment helped and you want to keep that engine running clean going forward, the real prevention is not more water treatments on a schedule. It is boring discipline. Use a top-tier detergent gasoline consistently. That standard is specifically written to minimize deposits on fuel injectors, intake valves, and combustion chambers, and independent testing found that non-top-tier gasolines created 19 times more engine deposits in simulated driving. Keep the tune right. Plugs, timing, filters. Let the engine reach full operating temperature regularly, because short trips that never let the motor get truly hot are how deposits accumulate fastest. Treat the water method as condition-based, not a monthly ritual. If the truck starts pinging again after a long stretch of good running, that is a signal to evaluate, not to automatically reach for the water jug or another can. Let me be honest about what this does. On the strongest evidence, carbon deposits are real. They affect engine performance and emissions, and water exposure can promote flaking of some combustion chamber deposits. That is solid. On moderate evidence, this old shop water decarbonizing method can help the right older gasoline engine that has light to moderate chamber buildup. The historical patents support the practice, and the SAE flaking research supports the mechanism. But that is not the same as a blanket recommendation for every truck on the road. On weak or unacceptable evidence, any claim that this makes your truck last 500,000 miles without repairs, or that it completely restores compression, or that it works on all modern engines, those claims are not honest, and I will not make them. Where this fails, if the root cause is mechanical wear, burned valves, ring problems, injector faults, ignition faults, or the kind of modern intake valve deposits that fuel never touches, this method may do little or nothing. When to call a professional, if the truck has a hard miss, active diagnostic codes, overheating, severe knock, heavy oil consumption, or modern engine hardware you cannot confidently identify, stop and take it to a trained technician. There is no shame in that. The old mechanics knew when a trick fit and when it did not, and knowing the difference was the real skill. I said I would be blunt about safety, and here it is. The central hazard is hydrolock, too much liquid water entering a cylinder too fast. It can destroy an engine in a single compression stroke. The safeguards are simple and non-negotiable. Older gasoline engines only, unless a Manufacturer procedure says otherwise. Engine fully hot, outdoors, parking brake set, a helper if you can get one. No big pores, no forcing the engine through a hard stumble, no macho nonsense. Stop the water instantly if the engine drops sharply or sounds abnormal. And do not present this to yourself or anyone else as normal preventive maintenance for a modern daily driver. This is an old shop method for a specific kind of engine and a specific kind of problem used with care. Now I want to take a moment, because here is where it all comes together. Look at what we have walked through. A careful metered water induction method, a fine mist or a controlled vacuum sip, applied to a fully warmed older gasoline engine at a steady elevated idle for a short conservative treatment. Not a pour, not a flood, not a stunt. The mechanism is real. Water promotes the flaking of some combustion chamber deposits through thermal and moisture. Shock. The scope is honest. It can help light to moderate deposits on the right engine, but it will not fix mechanical wear, and it does not belong on every truck. The consumable cost is $1 and change. The honest math is plain. Put it on the pad. 1 gallon of distilled water, $1.37. A reusable spray bottle if you want one, $1.34. A length of reusable vinyl tubing if you prefer the vacuum method, $4.96, and it lasts for years. Even counting the reusable hardware, your first setup is under $8, and every treatment after that costs you the price of a water jug, about $1 and change. 1 can of commercial upper engine cleaner runs about $15.99. A full professional carbon cleaning service can run considerably more. If your old gas truck is actually a fit for this method, the consumable saving is real. But the bigger value is not the $14 you kept in your pocket. The bigger value is avoiding the guesswork, because if the truck is not a fit, the cheapest move is to stop before you turn a deposit problem into an engine problem. There is no money in teaching a careful owner that some old deposit problems on older gas engines can be approached with heat, water, and restraint. There is money in a shelf full of cleaners, in repeated services, and in letting simple mechanical judgment die off. That is not because somebody had to hide anything. It is because retail products scale better than shop wisdom. A can has a label, a price, and a shelf spot. A careful old method that requires judgment and costs $1 does not have a marketing department. And the irony is that today's manufacturers mostly sell the real prevention in plain sight anyway. Better detergent fuel, approved cleaners, and correct diagnostics. But most people still get marketed the bottle first and the judgment never. That is not a conspiracy. It is a system nobody had to coordinate. This was never really about a jug of water. It is about whether the owner of an old truck knows the difference between a cheap, honest first try and a fairy tale. The old mechanics were not special because they had secret fluids. They were special because they understood fit, limits, and the cost of being wrong. A home and a shop that depend on judgment instead of the parts store aisle, that is the thing worth recovering. Here is what I want you to do. Tonight, look at your truck honestly. Is it an older gasoline engine with a simple intake path and symptoms that actually fit light chamber deposits, a little pinging under load, some roughness that crept in over time? Or is it something else that needs real diagnostics? Be honest with yourself the way the old mechanics were honest with their customers. This week, switch to a top-tier detergent gasoline if you are not already using one, and confirm that your plugs, timing, and basic tune are in order, because there is no sense blaming carbon when the ignition is tired. Only after that, if the engine type and the symptom profile genuinely fit, consider a conservative water decarbonizing treatment the way I showed you. Metered, careful, short. This month, if the symptoms remain after an honest try, move to real diagnostics or professional cleaning instead of repeating a folk remedy and hoping. Now I have 2 things to ask you. and I mean both of them. First, what old gas truck have you still got running? And what is the symptom that tells you it might be time to look at the chambers? I want to hear it. And second, if your father, your grandfather, or an old shop foreman had a careful engine-saving method, not a stunt, but a real method, something he did with judgment and restraint, put it in the comments, because these little pieces of inherited shop wisdom disappear when nobody writes them down. I read every single one. If you want more of the plain old ways that save real money and tell you the truth about limits, subscribe, and next time, same principle, different problem. The cheap old shop habits that prevent carbon and heat from getting ahead of you in the first place, fuel, tune, and the common mistakes that make old trucks feel tired long before their time. Until then, check the engine honestly, buy the better fuel, try the cheap, careful thing only when the truck and the symptom actually fit, and never confuse a useful old method with a miracle. That is how the careful old mechanics kept things running without owing anybody a dime. That is how it is still done in any shop that remembers.